Good evening and Erev Tov, everyone. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Va'era and Os Ches, section 8, and our learning should be dedicated to a refuah shlema, a full and speedy recovery for Nassan Meir ben Yocheved Bela. Before we start this section, we're going to take a look at one pasuk from our Parsha, from Parshas Va'era, and this is a pasuk. It's Perek Zayin, pasuk Chaf Aleph. It has to do with the makas dam, the plague of blood. So the Torah says, "V'hadoga asher bayor," and the fish that were in the rivers, Mesa, died. Vayivash hayor, and the river stank. V'lo yochlu Mitzrayim lishtos mayim min hayor, and the Egyptians were not able to drink water from the river. Vayehi hadam b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and the blood was in all of the land of Egypt. So this pasuk tells us that in addition to the fact that the Egyptians lost the ability, were deprived of the ability to drink water from the rivers and streams and everything, also the fish died. And they had to deal with that problem as well, which was in addition to the problem with the water turning into blood. So the Zera Shimshon starts with a Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah, v'hadoga asher bayor mesa. So the Medrash Rabbah starts by quoting our pasuk that the fish died. Omar Rebbe, now you can see it says Omar Rebbe Chanina, but in the parentheses, the text is changed to the way it looks when we take a look in the Medrash Rabbah itself. It says Omar Rebbe Avin Halevi Berebbe. So that's the way we're going to read it. Omar Rebbe Avin Halevi Berebbe. Mimakas dam ha'ashiru Yisrael. From the plague of blood, the Jewish people in Egypt became wealthy. Shahayu mochrim mayim lemitzrayim, because they were able to sell water to Egypt, v'chuli, etc. So before we look at the Zera Shimshon's question, the two questions he's about to ask, let's just talk about what the Medrash Rabbah says, because he gives us just a tiny little excerpt from the actual discussion or narrative in the Medrash Rabbah. What happens over there is that the Medrash tells us that when the makas dam happened, when the plague of blood happened, you would have a container, a big, large container, let's say a barrel of water, and that Jews and Egyptians were used to taking their water from. And if an Egyptian came and took water out of it, the water would become blood, and it would have no use to the Egyptian. However, if a Jew came and took water out of that same barrel, it would be water, and the Jewish person would drink it. So the Egyptian has a problem. Obviously, he or she wants to drink water. Whenever they take water out of this barrel, it turns to blood. But they see Jewish people coming one after another and taking water out of the barrel and drinking it and filling up glasses and cups and pots and whatever they need. The water stays fine. So the Medrash says that ultimately one of the Egyptians said to a Jew, "You draw the water and give it to me." So the Jewish person drew the water and the water was fine. But as soon as he gave it to the Egyptian wanted to drink it or use it, it turned into blood. So the Egyptian was very enterprising, and he said, "Okay, wait a minute. Fill up, let's say, a bowl with water," he said to the Jewish person, "and you start drinking. And while you're drinking, I'm going to come over and take a sip also. I'm going to try and drink from it also." If they had straws in those times, then that would have been a good time to use a straw. So the Jewish person actually starts drinking the water from this bowl, and the Egyptian comes. But when the Egyptian tries to drink from the same exact bowl that the Jew is presently drinking from, is actively drinking from, that turns to blood as well. So the Egyptians tried everything they could think of to figure out a way to use the Jews in order to be able to drink the water through them. And that nothing worked until finally an Egyptian said, "Wait a minute, how about if I buy water from you? I'll pay you for the water." And when they did that, the water stayed as water. The water stayed in its natural form. And the Egyptians realized and learned that they were able to get water as long as they purchased it. They couldn't, there was no other way they could make use of the water, but if they purchased it from the Jews, according to the Medrash Rabbah, then then it would remain in its form, in its natural form of water, and they were able to drink it and to use it, etc. So because of that, the Jews became wealthy. There are not many needs that people had, certainly at that time, when there were many less drink options and beverage options. Certainly at that time, especially also in a hot climate, there are not many needs that were more important to the Egyptians than water. And the only way they could get water for any purpose that they could use and without having it turn into blood was to buy it from the Jews. So the Jews became wealthy and rich because of the Makas Dam, because of the plague of blood. And that's what the Medrash Rabbah teaches us. So now the Zera Shimshon says, let's return to the text. Makshim ha'olam, the whole word asks the question, ma inyan drasha zu al pasuk zeh dafka. What's the connection between this drasha, that the Jews became rich during the Makas Dam, during the plague of blood, and the pasuk that said the fish died in the river during the plague of blood, right? There doesn't seem to be a connection between the drasha that the Medrash Rabbah, the lesson that the Medrash Rabbah is teaching us about how the Jews became rich and why they became rich through the plague of blood, and the fact that the fish, the story has nothing to do with the fish. And the fact that the fish died. So everyone asked, what's the connection between the pasuk and the drasha that the Medrash Rabbah states on that pasuk? What's the connection? Vehechi remiza, and how is this particular drasha, this idea of the Jews becoming rich, how is it even hinted to in the pasuk about the fish dying? So that's really the question here that the Zera Shimshon wants to start off with. V'yesh lomar, and we can say shahadover yadua. It is a known thing. Shebamida she'adam moded ba shebaidam she'adam she'adam moded ba modedim lo. It's a known thing, and you can see the Zera Shimshon quotes from a Gemara Masechta Megillah that the midah that a person uses, the measurement that a person measures with, that's how he or she is measured. So the way a person acts, that's how he or she is treated min hashamayim, so to speak. We call that midah keneged midah. V'hinei hamitzriim, behold, when we think about the Egyptians, hayu menichin es Yisrael latzud dagim, they used to allow the Jews to catch fish, v'hayu ochlim, and the Jews could eat the fish, beli kesef, without money, ubeli mechir, without cost, right? The Egyptians, for some reason, with all of the persecution, with all of the servitude and the slavery, and with all of the terrible things that were happening, the Egyptians allowed the Jews to go fish in the rivers and the streams and catch fish and eat it. They didn't forbid them this practice. They didn't even charge them. They didn't say you have to pay for the fish. They allowed the Jews to go catch the fish and eat the fish without paying any money. That's why we find a pasuk later on in the Torah during the time of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, during the 40 years in the Midbar, we find a pasuk where some of the Jewish people say, Zacharnu es hadaga asher nochal b'Mitzrayim chinam. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for free. As we know, there were different times that members of Bnei Yisrael complained about various parts of their experiences in the Midbar. And one of the things they complained about was the lack of certain kinds of foods. And they said, we remember that we used to be able to eat fish chinam, for free. We didn't even have to pay for it. So the Zera Shimshon says that's a reference to this idea, this fact that the Egyptians used to let them fish and catch as many fish as they wanted, and they could eat the fish and they didn't have to pay anybody. And so that's what the pasuk was referring to. Now, later on, you'll see the Zera Shimshon is going to bring in a different opinion about how to interpret that pasuk. But for right now, he's taking the pasuk at its face value, and he's saying, we see that the Egyptians used to have fish for free. And therefore, mitam zeh, according to this reason, lo hayu lahem ledogim lamus, the fish should not have died. That means, since we have a rule of midah keneged midah, and the Egyptians happen to do a nice thing and let the Jews catch fish for free, it wouldn't make sense, according to the principle of midah keneged midah, that Hashem would then punish the Egyptians and make the fish die as part of the makas dam, as part of the plague of blood. Because after all, that was this one little area where the Egyptians did a nice thing, where the Egyptians did a chesed and a kindness to Bnei Yisrael and let them catch fish and eat fish to their heart's content without even charging them a fee, without even charging money. So since the Egyptians did that, you would think that Hashem would dafka not kill the fish, which deprived the Egyptians also of being able to eat the fish in the rivers and the streams, etc. So we would think Hashem would not do that because Mida Keneged Mida, since the Egyptians did nice things with the fish should have been protected, so to speak, from dying in any of the plagues. And that way, both the Egyptians and the Jews could have continued eating the fish. That's what we would expect. Ve'od, and another question, in addition to what the Zera Shimshon just said, Shezehu nezek gadol Yisrael. Not only did this hurt the Egyptians when the fish died, and so far it seems unreasonably so or unjustifiably so, but it also caused great damage to the Jews. Shelo yimtzu od dagim le'achol chinam. They were no longer able to find fish for free, right? One of the nice aspects of being a Jewish life as a Jewish slave in Egypt was that you could catch fish and eat them for free. And now they lost even that because the fish died. The imirtu mizonos acherim, and if they wanted other food, now that the fish were dead, they are going to look for other food. Tzrichim lifroa mikisam. They would need to pay from their pockets. And we understand that the Bnei Yisrael in Egypt, like any slaves, probably didn't have access to much money. So now their one free food, the fish from the waters, the fish all died during the plague of blood, and that's it. It's taken away from them. So the Egyptians lose the fish, which was an area of life in which they were nice to the Bnei Yisrael. So that the Zera Shimshon says doesn't make sense. And the Jews lose the fish. And certainly Hashem, when he's punishing the Egyptians with the makas dam, with the plague of blood, it wouldn't seem that part of his intention was that the Jews should lose this benefit of having the fish, the free fish that they were getting up until that point. So the Zera Shimshon is asking on why the fish were killed in the makas dam, which hurt both the Egyptians and the Jews, and again, unreasonable. It seems to be apparently unreasonably so. And so this question ultimately is on the pasuk when it says, and the fish died, because the fish shouldn't have died for the reasons that Zera Shimshon is given. So because we have that question on the pasuk, that's what the Medrash Rabbah is coming to answer. Therefore, Rabbi Chanina came, and we already said in the beginning, our text doesn't say Rabbi Chanina. Our text in the Medrash Rabbah says Rabbi Avin Halevi Berebi. So that's why Rabbi Avin Halevi Berebi came along on the pasuk about the fish dying. The Dorish al pasuk zeh dafka, and he specifically explained on this pasuk about the fish dying, shemimakas dam shiur Yisrael, that during the plague of blood, which yes did kill the fish, but it also enriched the Jews. Ve'im kein lo hayutzrichim od le'echol, and if so, if they became enriched during this time, they would no longer need to eat hadagim bechinam. This is moving to the top of the next page. They would no longer need to eat the fish for free. Shahara yesh lahem ma'os harbe. Now they have lots of money, liknos mashetzrichim, to buy whatever it is that they need, whatever food articles, food items that they need, they can now buy because they became enriched through the makas dam, and they were selling water to the Egyptians all the time. Constantly, Egyptians were coming to them to buy water, and so the Jews were becoming richer and richer, and they could buy whatever food they needed, and the idea of eating the fish for free was no longer a big attraction, was no longer an important source of food for Bnei Yisrael. So let's pause here and understand what the Zera Shimshon has explained to us and for us. So his original question was, what does this idea of the fish dying have to do with the drush in the Medrash Rabbah about the Jews becoming rich? There doesn't seem to be any connection between those two things. So he has showed us that there's a very direct connection, because the Medrash Rabbah is coming to teach us and say, you might think that it doesn't make sense for Hashem to have killed the fish during the plague of blood, during the makas dam, and you might think that that doesn't make sense for two reasons. One, it hurts the Egyptians who, again, as the Zera Shimshon explained, were helping the Jews and being kind with the fish, so it doesn't really make sense to take a fish away from the Egyptians and punish them in that area. And two, it doesn't make sense to take it away from the Jews who desperately needed food and nutrition and nourishment, and this was their one source of free nutrition and food and nourishment. So it doesn't make sense. So the Zera Shimshon says that's exactly why the Medrash Rabbah comes to say it was a trade-off. Hashem says, I'm bringing makas dam. I'm bringing the plague of blood on the Egyptians. And Hashem says, I have my reasons to do that. And the fish are going to die. Now you're going to tell me, but that was bad for the Egyptians because they were doing such a nice thing with the fish. Well, the fact is that no longer applies. The nice thing that the Egyptians were doing to fish is no longer relevant because the Jews don't need the fish anymore. And the Jews aren't losing out with the death of the fish because they can buy whatever they want. They're no longer limited to these free fish. They can buy whatever they want with the tremendous wealth that they were able to accumulate during the Makas Dam, during the plague of blood, by selling water to the Egyptians all over the country. So that's what the Zera Shimshon has explained to us so far. Let's continue. Ve'od yesh lefaresh, and we can also explain shemasha omer hakosav, that which the pasuk says, es hadoga asher nochal b'mitzrayim chinam, that the Jews in the Midbar, some of them remembered and complained and recalled the fish that they ate in Egypt for free. Eino rotze lomar chinam mamish. It doesn't mean that they ate it for free actually. Okay, this is a different opinion that the Zera Shimshon is bringing about that pasuk, as we mentioned in the beginning. This is a different interpretation, which says, do not take this pasuk literally. There was no free fish. Like they say, there is no free lunch. Well, this new opinion is coming that the Zera Shimshon is bringing, and it's saying there was no free fish. It doesn't mean that fish was free, really. As we say in the 8th parak of Meseches Yuma, Elachinam below mitzvos. But really what it was talking about was the Jews remembered being able to eat fish euphemistically for free, meaning without any rules attached to it. And what does it mean euphemistically? The expression, we remember eating fish, the Gemara over there tells us, according to one opinion, according to one Manda Amar, referred to having sexual intercourse. And so the Jews said, now that we're received the Torah, there are all kinds of rules that govern sexual behavior and sexual activity. Back in Mitzrayim, before we received the Torah, we didn't have those rules. And so therefore we remember chinam, we remember that we could do things in that area of life, do those kinds of activities, chinam, for free, meaning without any mitzvahs, without any rules and regulations attached to them. And now that we have the Torah and we have mitzvahs, there are lots of rules and regulations that guide and govern the area, all areas of life, but also the area of sexual activity. So according to that opinion, the pasuk was never meant to be taken literally, and there was no phenomenon of Egyptians being so nice that they gave the Jews fish for free. It was just an expression. It was a euphemistic expression that referred to something entirely different and had nothing to do with the literal idea of the Egyptians giving the Jews fish for free. That's according to this other opinion who chooses not to take the pasuk literally, but rather metaphorically and euphemistically. So let's continue. Mishum hachi, and because of this, mesu hadogim, and that's why it was okay for the fish to die. Shaham mitzrim lo haya lohem bohem shum schus, because the Egyptians did not actually have with the fish any particular merit that would have protected the fish in order for the Egyptians to be able to keep eating the fish. Shelo nostam osam liyisrael b'chinam, because in fact the Egyptians never did give fish to the Jews for free. So here what the Zera Shimshon has done is he said, I've explained how the psukim in the Medrash Rabbah could be understood according to the view in the Gemara in Masechta Yuma, which was kind of his starting point, even before he mentioned that Gemara, that we take the pasuk literally. So he's explained everything according to the Pashut Pshat in the pasuk. That means the Egyptians actually did allow the Jews to go fishing and catch fish and eat fish without paying for the fish. And therefore the Egyptians did have a certain zuchus, a certain merit because of that. And then he said, according to that, we've already explained that once the Jews became rich, they no longer needed the fish. And so it didn't count as a merit for the Egyptians because the Jews no longer cared about getting the free fish. So the Egyptians didn't have the merit that might have protected the fish from dying. And the Jews no longer needed the fish. So the fish died and it wasn't a problem. And that's what he said already. Now he's saying, but according to the other Manda Amar, according to the other school of thought in the Gemara and Masechta Yuma, which says that pasuk was never meant to be understood literally. And it actually had nothing to do with, it was not a reference to the Egyptians giving the Jews fish for free, because that never actually happened. And that pasuk is not, and it shouldn't be understood literally. It's referring to something totally different and not connected to this idea that the Egyptians gave the Jews fish for free. So because of that, of course, it's no problem that the fish died in the plague of Makas Dam, and we don't have a question of why would Hashem kill the fish when the Egyptians were being so nice about the fish. Turns out, no, we were wrong. The Egyptians weren't being so nice about the fish. That whole story is not to be understood literally. Zera Shimshon continues, Ve'ein lahakshos al pshat hakosav. And you don't need to ask, or you shouldn't ask on the explanation of the pasuk, Ma tzorech lahashmiyonu, what did the pasuk need to teach us? Shemesu hadagim, that the fish died, right? This whole piece in the Zera Shimshon started with the pasuk that says the fish in Mitzrayim in the rivers died during the plague of Dam. So the Zera Shimshon says, you might want to ask, I'm telling you not to ask, but you might think to ask the following question. Why did the pasuk need to come and teach me that the fish died? V'halo milsa de pshitahi. That is something that is totally obvious. I don't need the Torah to tell me that. Shaharei hadagim kol mechiyosam einam ela b'mayim. Fish can only live in water. V'achshav shenevchu hamayim ledam. And now that the water has been turned into blood during the Makas Dam, during this plague of blood, bevadai sheyesh lahem lamus. So of course the fish are going to die. It's obvious that the fish are going to die if the water is turned into blood. So the Zera Shimshon says, you might say, why did the Torah even need to waste words and say what we saw, and the fish died at this time during the plague of blood? Why did it need to say that? It's obvious that once the water turns to blood, the fish will die. Why is it important, the Zera Shimshon says, for the pasuk? Why do we need the pasuk to teach us that the fish died? She'ef shalomar, because it would have been possible to say she'af shenefchu hamayim ledam, that even though the blood turned to water, lo hayadam mamish, you might have thought it wasn't actually blood. Ella shemasha hayushovim hamitzriim bilvad hayanir elohem dam. Maybe what happened was, when the Egyptians took water and drew water from the river, it looked like blood. It wasn't actually blood, but it took on the appearance of blood. Aval masha hayushovim Yisrael hamayim mamish. But when Jews drew water from the river, they actually had real water. So the Zera Shimshon says, you might have thought, since the Jews take water from the river and it's real, pure, wonderful natural water, so the actual water must still be water. But when the Egyptians draw it, it takes on the appearance of blood. You might have thought that was the case. If so, then even the fish could have lived. Hoil shahayu mizonim shel Yisrael, because they were the food for the Jewish people. So Hashem, you might have thought Hashem would make it so that the river didn't really literally turn to blood, and the fish can survive. And if the fish survive, that's good for the Jews because they can keep eating the fish. Vehamayim legabe hadagim lo hoyolohem liyos dam. And in turn, regarding the fish, the water didn't turn to blood. That was only if the Egyptians took water, it turned to blood. But the fish could swim around in the water and be fine. You might have thought all of that, which he just described, is what you might have mistakenly thought. Ella, but the Torah comes along and it says, Shemimakas dam shiur Yisrael. The Jewish people became rich during the plague of blood, and that means they were not concerned about the fact that the fish actually did die. And so the pasuk needed to teach us that the fish actually did die. And the Medrash Rabbah then came along to say, but don't worry about Bnei Yisrael, who lost out the free fish, because they now became even wealthier through the fact that they could sell water to the Egyptians. So the whole Havamina, the whole train of thought that the Zera Shimshon said you might have thought, turns out to be mistaken, but it explains why the pasuk needed to tell us that the fish died, as opposed to having us understand that as an obvious result of the fact that the water turned to blood, because we might have thought it didn't really turn to blood and the fish could still live. So the Torah says, no, don't think that. The fish died, and this created an even further, an additional aspect of the plague that that hurt the Egyptians. So the damage to the Egyptians wasn't just that they didn't have any drinking water. It's also was that all of the fish died and they couldn't catch fish as they normally would have for themselves to eat fish, etc. And it also created a tremendous cleanup problem for them that they had to ultimately deal with. So the Torah is making sure that we understand the extent of the damage done during Makas Dam. And meanwhile, Hashem protected Bnei Yisrael in every way, not only that they could drink the water, but that they became enriched through selling water to the Mitzrim and no longer had problems of how to find food to eat or how to pay for the food which they desired. Yasher koach to everyone for participating, and we look forward, God willing, next week to continuing our learning in the Zera Shimshon.